everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be discussing colorism and just some of my hot takes I have about colorism. What I guess provoked these thoughts or kind of triggered them was recently there's a conversation on TikTok about basically comparing Skepta, the model, I think he's the artist, I'm not sure, but Skepta and rising actor Aaron Pierre. And for the past year, people have been swooning over Aaron Pierre. He has just been everywhere, especially since the Jennifer Hudson little stroll he did on his appearance on the Jennifer Hudson show. But you may know him from Rebel Ridge, the movie Old, and more recently he's voicing Mufasa in Disney's Mufasa's Lion King. And him and Skepta were seen together, taking a picture together, and basically this photo sparked a conversation in the comments, basically saying that how next to Skepta, Aaron Pierre is there's no competition, basically. Skepta is giving him a run for his money, pretty much. And because he was standing next to Skepta, it made Aaron Pierre less attractive from comparison. And I wanted to talk about why that is, and some of the comments I saw surrounding Skepta's appearance and just dark-skinned men. And I noticed sometimes sometimes women, cishet, heterosexual black women, we I feel kind of fetishize dark-skinned men sometimes, compared to lighter-skinned men. I feel in the black community anyway, but dark-skinned men are seen as more masculine. I feel when we describe them, we often describe them as strong or stronger compared to light-skinned men. I feel when we just express desire for dark-skinned people, we always say things like chocolate or give me some chocolate babies and things like that, or just alluring to the fact that dark-skinned men are just bigger in the genital area, or just perform better in bed. And I feel even pretty much in most situations, light-skinned people have more privilege than dark-skinned people do, systematically. And I feel these, all these comments most of the time that we make about dark-skinned people are, I feel with a good intention, and it's meant to be a compliment, but sometimes I feel when it's overdone, or it's just too much, it feels icky or fetishy. And I could be wrong, but it's just how it feels to me. It just feels a little too much. And I'm gonna explain why. But I feel when we see just an attractive person, we're just so willing to have sex with them, just because off the fact that they're just desirable. And even though most of the time it's a joke, but a lot of times I'll see people in the comments saying raw next question when they're referring to Aaron Pierre or Skepta or anybody that's attractive. And that's pretty much alluding to the fact that they would have unprotected sex with that person just based off their looks, right? So, and most people are aware of possible consequences of unprotected sex, so I'm not gonna really get into that. But even going back to my conversation about single mothers briefly, in the black community, I feel we shame them for for having unprotected sex, and that results into a child. But in relation to someone we find attractive, we joke about it and are so willingly have sex with them because they're just attractive. And that seems kind of contradictory to me. But that brings me to my next point. Because Skepta, Idris Elba, Denzel Washington, Kofi, they're all dark-skinned, and all are seen as stronger and masculine. The thing is with that, when black women, when we, dark skinned women especially, when we do this or compliment these men in this way or hype them up so much, it's like, there's nothing wrong with, of course, you know, making a dark-skinned man feel good about himself, telling him that he's sexy, that he's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I just think sometimes it feels ironic because our dark skin doesn't benefit us in the same way as it benefits the men. It's how dark-skinned men are seen as more masculine and more tough, or just like mean, or just rough, or just masculine. I feel like people will also attach those same traits to dark-skinned women, but not in a positive way, because we're women, so we're not to be masculine because we're women. But because we have dark skin, people see us as more masculine, and when being compared to light-skinned women who are seen as softer and nicer, and even light-skinned people they're bullied, and light-skinned people do get bullied for being light-skinned, and the types of insults that results from bullying is very different from light-skinned people and dark-skinned people. Because I feel like I see often with light-skinned women when they're being bullied in school, or just even when they get older, just in general, when they get bullied or when someone tries to insult them, they get called things like stuck up, or like HOE, or say things like, oh, she thinks she's too good for me, or things like that, which are horrible things to call someone, and I'm sure feel terrible. But I feel like those insults all allude to their desirability to a certain extent. And their desirability and like their status, even though it is an insult, is still kind of like alluding to like, oh, you think you're better than me, things like that, or just like emphasizing more their desire, and they're not really like taking anything away from it. It's more like they try to insult more their personality or their attitude, but like, oh, you think you're too good, you think because you're pretty, you can be mean, pretty much. But you're still getting called pretty, in that, you're still, in a way, they're still like emphasizing just how desirable you are or whatever. But when you compare it to how dark-skinned girls get insulted, we get called monkey, ugly, dirty, broke, cheap, especially if we don't adhere to like respectability politics, or if we're in a bigger body, that makes it even 10 times worse. And I feel like when you compare, like, and I say that it's different because when you're a dark-skinned woman that's like a Viola Davis or a Tika Sumpter, and you kind of, not saying these women are doing or intentionally acting a way to not be seen as a stereotype. I feel like that's just their personality, that's just who they are as a person. But Viola Davis has a very regal presence about her. She's somewhat modest, I guess you can say, when you compare her to Young Miami or a Sexy Red or a Lizzo. When you compare the two, she's a little bit more modest than those women are. And so when you don't adhere to those respectability to politics and you're a bigger person, it makes like colorism a lot worse for you, because like you can't be dark skinned and also be like proud of it, or like you can't be dark skinned and not have yourself together. Just how when you're a big girl, like you can't be a big girl and not eat, like you got to be on top of it. So it's like when you don't fall into that, or you don't feel like you have to be like perfect all the time, it makes it a lot worse for you. And that's when you'll see more of those like dirty, ugly comments and stuff like that, where I feel like with light-skinned women, that pressure isn't as heavy. It's still there because you're still a black woman, but that pressure isn't as like intense to act a certain way, I feel like. Going back to how it feels fetishy with these comments surrounding Skepta and whatnot, I feel like in slavery, where they would put dark-skinned people like out in the field, and I feel like it indicates and reaffirms the comments that you still have about dark-skinned people today, whether it's a compliment or not. I feel like when slave masters would put dark-skinned people in the field, I feel like that says to me like, okay, because your skin is darker, you can take more, you can handle more, your body can endure more pain, you can stay out in the field for hours. And then when they separate the light-skinned people or the mixed people, whatever, and put them in the house, I feel like that says to me, okay, they're lighter, let's preserve that. Because you're softer, you can handle that. Your skin is lighter, so it's softer, it's more gentle. So we have to keep you in here to preserve that little bit of whiteness that you have, or that little bit of passability that you have as a light skin or just mixed race person, and so we can keep you that way. I do feel like light skinned people are fetishized when it comes to, well, not really, I guess maybe fetishize is the wrong word, but I feel like people make kind of inappropriate comments when it comes to light-skinned people when it comes to like producing children, I feel like. Because just how people may say they want chocolate babies, people may intentionally be with a light-skinned person because they can produce children that look a certain way. If they want children who have looser textured hair, just children who don't look black or look ambiguous, the most farthest away from how they look as possible. I feel like dark-skinned people, but with dark-skinned people in comparison to that, I feel like dark-skinned people are very much used for our bodies, I feel like. And I say that's what I mean by like providing service. For example, putting us in the field versus providing like harsh services, like services that weigh a lot on your body, compared to our light skin counterparts. I feel like I said before, putting us in the field, having us to endure all that manual labor, or just wanting to have sex with us because they feel like we're better in bed, and that's more so aiming more at like dark-skinned men. It reminds me of like Django when they were talking about the Mandingos and stuff like that, and just that whole, that's what it makes me think of when I hear like all these overly like sexual comments surrounding dark-skinned men. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with finding dark-skinned men attractive. It's just sometimes it's like it's just because whenever we hype up dark-skinned men, it's always to tear someone else down, and vice versa. Like when we hype up light-skinned women, it's used to often to spite dark-skinned women. So that's what I'm saying. It's like it doesn't benefit the community, I feel like. Not overall, not complimenting, but just when you're using those compliments to put down the other side, I feel like. Personal experience, honestly, with this to a certain extent, because being bigger, curvier, shapely, and I'm not dark skinned. I mean, I consider myself darker. Like, I'm not light skinned, so I consider myself dark skinned to a certain extent. There's definitely people that are darker than me, and I feel like because I'm not the darkest, I definitely have privilege there, because I'm not as dark as black people come in all shades. But I can also fall victim to colorism as well, because I'm not light skinned. I feel like most of the time that I meet a man, or whether it be online or in person, they're always commenting on my shape and how it relates to them sexually. I feel like men see my body as like a challenge they want to like overcome to prove like their masculinity. So when I do have SCX, it's almost most of the time very rough experience, like immediately. And men, I feel like, see that I'm bigger, I'm darker, and if they see that as like the dark-skinned men that I have dated, I feel like they want to like prove that they can like really like put it down, or like affirm those stereotypes about dark-skinned men, or just prove that they can handle me. I get that a lot. And how they won't try to hurt me because they got so much going on down there or whatever. I hear that a lot. But they already kind of had that cockiness and that effort affirmed because maybe they've had sex with people before. Light-skinned men, in comparison, I feel like they are wanting to really prove that they are that masculine because of the outside world telling them that they're not. So sometimes they will also be very rough with me, or just trying to feel like they have something to prove versus just actually just participating in the sex. Like, something else that I noticed in the Black community, even though dark-skinned men are preferred openly in most situations, I feel like a lot of black women, like, that are my color and maybe darker, end up being with like a lot of light-skinned men. And I feel like on the other end of this, like, I see very common, like, it's always a dark-skinned man with a light-skinned woman. Like, I won't say it's rare you see two dark-skinned people together, because of course you see it all the time, but I feel like it's only common in certain groups, maybe like in where it's like highly populated with a lot of Black people, like maybe at HBCU or something like that. Like, of course there's two dark-skinned people that you see it all the time, but it's like I notice it's always some sort of contrast with couples, not even just Black couples, sometimes couples in general, but mostly in my community it's always some type of contrast in appearance, even among same-sex relationships. I'll see like a really slim girl with a really big guy. Either way, it's always like a big difference physically. Or it'll be like a thicker girl with like a skinnier, tall, light-skinned dude. Like, I don't know, is it just me? Am I the only person that sees that like common? Like, I've picked up on that where it's like with couples, not all the time, but it's like a contrast and just how they look. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. I just never see anyone talk about why it may exist. I think in simplest terms, but not in every case. Because I think sometimes, you know, you can be a dark-skinned man and who's bigger, and a skinny, light-skinned woman who just happened to fall in love. Like, I'm sure that happens. But I do feel like when you desire something and you're intentionally seeking a certain type of person to date, and your preference, if it's like a preference, and I feel like it's a reflection of like your self-worth, and just how we think of ourselves. And I'm not talking about like a light-skinned woman who just happened to fall in love with someone who's dark-skinned, or etc., or whatever variations. Like, it's just intentionally, if you date people who look different than you or a certain way. I think it's ironic how dark-skinned women sometimes praise Black men like A$AP Rocky or Chris Brown or Kodak Black, or just platform them, and some of these men, they wouldn't even like spit in our direction. A lot of Black men, I feel like, don't want someone that looks like them. And I see both men and women date lighter people just so they can have kids that look lighter, or just not like them. And I feel like at the end of the day, like, it's self-hate, and it stems from just the beauty standards set up by white people. Like, and I think there are beautiful Black couples that exist that aren't self-hating and just love each other, which is also important. like Barack and Michelle, Gabrielle Union and Dwayne Wade, the Currys, Sierra and Russell Wilson. The list goes on and on. I mean, there's just as much as beautiful black couples out there as there is with just toxic, self-hating ones. But yeah, those are just really all I had to say about just some of my takes on just colorism and just things that were thought-provoking for me. And yeah, it was interesting just thinking about how colorism just affects your desire. But yeah, this is just another YouTube video. Thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you on my next video.